My name is Craig Elias. In the next 14 minutes, I'm going to share with you how to tell between a hot prospect and a time waster. My name is Craig Elias, and for 20 years, I was just a lucky sales guy. I had this incredible knack of just showing up in front of hot prospects everywhere I went. And then one day it stopped. And I look back and I reflected on 20 years of success, all my 6, 7, 8-figure deals, and I realized there were specific things that were going on behind the scenes that I was lucky enough to take advantage of. I've taken what I've learned, I put it in a book. I'm lucky enough that some pretty cool people had great things to say about the book. I'm going to share with you how you can use the stuff in the book to spend more time selling to hot prospects. So when you're out there selling, the people you're trying to sell to are always in one of 3 different, what I call buying modes. The first one is called status quo. These are people that are happy with what they have and they see no reason to change. These are people that might be at the top of the funnel, here in the red. Are they a time waster or a hot prospect? Well, the dilemma is that it's only when people are farther down the funnel that are actually more likely to buy. And I would argue that these people are complete time wasters. And the odds they buy from you in the next little while is pretty close to 0. Now, what happens sometimes is there are people on the other end of this spectrum. So the first group are those that are happy with what they have and not looking. These are the people that are unhappy and they are looking. The question is, time waster or hot prospect? The dilemma, while yes, even though they may be more likely to buy because you got there so late, they're actually less likely to buy from you. And the research I've seen says that on average, they're only 16% likely to choose you over the competition. So the odds you win the business here, 1 in 6 or maybe 1 in 7. And I would argue these people, more times than not, are time wasters. But what's interesting is that between this status quo mode and searching for alternatives is a third window or mode in sales, and it's called the window of dissatisfaction. Here, people are unhappy with what they have, but they're so busy solving other problems, they haven't gotten to this problem yet. And the research I've seen by Forrester says that on average, the likelihood that they will give you this business when you get there first, because that's all part of being in the window of dissatisfaction, you are first in, the odds you win the business is 5 times higher than if you wait till they reach out to you. So being proactive, calling people in the window of dissatisfaction, these are the people that are hot prospects. You are 5 times more likely to get these people as customers, get the deal done. The best thing though isn't just that you get a really good customer. They're most of your profit, the least of your headaches, and if you ask, they'll give you testimonials and they'll act as a reference. And these testimonials and references are a great way into other accounts in the future. If you look at how people make decisions, decision makers make decisions, and how they justify or validate their purchase. If you look at this, you see that a chief sales officer, 29% of their decision is made based upon the influence of customer references and testimonials, more than anything else that they use. If you're talking to the CFO, same thing, really high, only a little bit less, 26%, but again, higher than anything else that they use. The CEOs, still high, not quite as high as their past experience with the company, but it's still, in this case, it's the second most used thing to justify or validate their decision. Now, I would argue that for everybody that's listening, they have gotten in front of a hot prospect in the window of dissatisfaction on multiple occasions in the past. And the way I would look back at my sales if I was you, go get a sheet, looks something like this. You can go to windowofdissatisfaction.com. You can get the full version of this sheet. Fill in the form, it emails it to you automatically. And what you want to do is you want to write down all the names of people you got as customers in the last little while. And what you want to do is you want to put a check mark next to those names where the deal happened quicker than usual. You want to go down the list a second time, put a check mark where it was relatively easy to get to the decision maker. You want to go down and put a check mark again where they didn't nickel and dime you on price. So did not nickel and dime you, where you got a higher price, check mark next to their name. And then one more time, someone who's willing to be a reference or gives you a testimonial, put a check mark next to their name. My argument to everybody on this call is every single person that you've got on the list that had three or more check marks next to their name, you got in front of a hot prospect while they're in the window of dissatisfaction. So now you kind of know what it looks like. The question is, how are you going to see them? And I'm a big fan of what a guy named John Lubbock says. John says what we see depends upon what we look for. So what are the three things to look for? When you're talking to someone, the first thing you want to look for, yes, you want to listen for, and you want to listen for people that use verbs to describe the outcome they're trying to get, not nouns that describe how they get that. So you might talk to someone who says, I want to buy exactly this, and I want it delivered by here, and it has to look like this. Those are people that use nouns. Those are time wasters. When someone explains the problem they want to solve using verbs, or the outcome they want to accomplish by using verbs, these people are hot prospects. They are in this window of dissatisfaction. If you get there first and help them define the problem, design the solution, and you start developing the relationship when there's no one else around, odds are you will win the business on average 74% of the time. The second thing to look for, you want to look for or listen for prospects that tell you something like, call me back in November when I will be looking at this, or call me back in 4 months when I'll be looking at this. And I'm sure everybody's had this happen. You call them back in November or in 4 months, and what's happened? They've already bought from somebody else. When you hear somebody say something like this, you need to say to yourself, this is a hot prospect. How do I find a way to get in front of these people, spend some time with them so that I can help them define the problem? You then get to design a solution, and you develop the relationship when there's nobody else around. The third thing to look for and or listen for is whether they've recently experienced a very specific event that would trigger them to become a motivated prospect. And this is something that I figured out in the summer of 2002. People buy based upon triggers. And the good news is, according to the report that I've seen from Andrew Gaffney, that 80% of B2B purchases are unbudgeted and unplanned. That means some trigger or event causes them to re-look at their priorities and take budget from one thing and assign it to something else. So what are these events or triggers? There's actually 3 different types. The first event is what causes someone to want what you have. These are what you might commonly call funnel fillers. The second thing, though, just because someone wants to buy doesn't mean they will buy. They don't go into the next stage until they can afford the money to buy it or afford the time to look at what you've had. And even then, more times than not, people need to have a third event, something that's going to shake something out of the funnel, because now they can finally justify the purchase. And when they have all 3 events, they then buy stuff and hopefully become your customer. So what are some of the specific triggers for hot prospects? I mean, you can try to make someone want what you have by using an awareness strategy, which you've probably heard of through the Challenger sale, right? Challenge the status quo. The problem that I have with that is that if somebody already has a really good relationship with a different vendor, more times than not, your idea gets borrowed and given to somebody else. Now, I recognize that some people get lucky and they get a first meeting. The data I've seen says that in less than 7% of the time, well, if you get a first meeting, do you actually get a second meeting? The second type of event is when they have a bad experience. This is something that happens with the competition. So the first thing is what you try. The second thing is what the competition does. Very often a change in people, the product, or some material change in the provider. So when a competitor goes through a merger or acquisition, very often that's a bad experience. That's a great opportunity That triggers people to all of a sudden go from being in status quo into the window of dissatisfaction and turns them into a hot prospect. The last thing is changes inside the organization you're trying to sell to. And I'm a big fan of a change in people. I'll talk about these. So a change in people, change in places, and a change in priorities. And when I think of a change in people, I think of a change in the people we talked about. CSO, CMO, CFO, CEO, selling farther up the organization. And the reason you want to sell farther up the organization is these people have more money, more authority, more influence, and more times than not, they only have to experience the first event before they change vendors or their buying patterns. But what's important is to look at people that change, someone who's new in their job. From what I've seen, decision makers that are new in their job, 80% of those that will make decisions worth $1 million or more, 80% of those people will make those decisions the first 90 days in their job. So you want to look for these new decision makers, mobilizers, as the Challenger sale would say. And I totally agree with this whole mobilizer thing. There are people that are more likely to make things happen. And my argument is they are decision makers new in their job. So when you get a chance and you notice that there's a new CFO, CMO, CSO, or CEO, or even COO in a job, you want to think to yourself, there's actually more than one opportunity. There's actually 4. And here's the 4. So you've got one person who, let's say, might have been a customer in the past. The first thing you want to do is you want to figure out where they went. Be the first person to reach out to them in their new job. If they were happy with you in the past, odds are highly likely they will buy from you again. The second opportunity is to figure out the person they replaced. Where has that person gone? Because odds are that person has gone on to a new role, highly likely to change vendors, and they now have more money, more authority, and more influence, and they don't have to very often go through the afford or justify events before they become your customer. The third opportunity is when you go back to the account where your contact left, and you want to figure out who replaced them in their old job. And you want to go talk to them in the new person that's in that job. And when you talk to that person, the very first question I believe you should ask is, where did you come from? Because that person has left a vacancy that before too long, someone else will fill. And that person is on average up to 10 times more likely to switch vendors than the person who was there before. So the question is, how do you find a way to make this happen? One of the things I'm a big believer is take a number of those people that are in the buying mode of status quo. Let's take a list of, let's say, 100 of them. If you start with 100, what US Census data tells us is that on average, 3% of those people will change jobs every single month. So if you started, let's say, in January, you would have 3 people that have changed jobs, so you want to follow them. That's 3. Plus, you want to figure out the place they went, where has that person gone? And that's 6 opportunities. In February, same thing. 3 more changed jobs. Where did they go? Where is that person who was there before gone? And the person that they left in January has now been replaced. And if you looked at all the opportunities, every single month it's more and more and more. So come December, at the end of the first year, you have 39 new opportunities just from an initial 100 contacts. You might not think that's a lot, but if you add them all up throughout the year, by the time you get to the end of the first year, you would 270 hot prospects. If you did it for 2 years, you would have 972. My name is Craig Elias. If you'd like a copy of my book and these actual slides, fill in the form found at shiftselling.com/hot. I will email you this presentation and a free copy of my book.